Okay, connecting.
Good morning and welcome. We're here for the Education Commissioning Quality Committee. Today, Tuesday, 15th of July, our meeting was moved, so apologies for that, but the previous meeting was scheduled for another event that most of the board were going to be involved in. So thank you for joining in, and it is a hybrid meeting, so we have some people present in the room and some people present online. We've got a long agenda to get through, huge amount of work has been undertaken, but I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to Seth Newman, who's observing from Audit Wales. Can't see you at the moment, Seth, just wonder if you're present.
I think Seth is trying to shoot public.
Oh, through the public. Okay, thank you. And Malcolm Jazraz, who's attending in place of Tom Lawson, so very welcome. But and I know you'll be talking to the papers. We've had apologies, I understand, from Martin Riley and Tom Lawson. Have we got any other apologies? No. And as this is my first time chairing, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Ruth Hall, who has been the chair and is vice chair of Health Education Improvement Wales Board, and who's present as well as a member of the committee. I just check with members present that are there any declarations of interest not already declared or related to matters on the agenda? Okay, thank you. And if I now move then to item 1.4, which is the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of March 2022, and I will go through them page by page for accuracy. And the chair at that time was Ruth. So if we look at page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and 10. So if you are content for us to accept those as an accurate record, superb.
Yeah, content.
Okay. Moving on now then to to 1.5 of the agenda, the action log of the Education Commissioning Quality Committee of the meeting held also on the 3rd of March. Again, if we want to raise any issues, David, do you want to talk to it?
Yes, yes, please. So just to confirm that bar one matter, which I'll discuss in a moment, all actions are either complete or considered further on today's agenda. The item I just wanted to expand on a little bit was with regards to the induction process and paper for the Education Committee. Just to confirm that we made really good progress with regards to developing the induction process. We have last week circulated it with the exec team. It has been circulated further before as well, so we're just receiving feedback on that, and the expectation is that we will have a final version of the induction process complete by the end of this month.
Okay, are there any questions or anything people want to ask in relation to that process? I know, David, that you received a lot of items from myself that I know when Ruth and I started the committee, and I just wondered whether there's any significant elements of that have changed dramatically that you think would be useful to us as the committee to review post-induction?
Oh, no, that's a really good point. So, as you rightly said, one of the bases of the induction process is the paperwork that you received when you joined the committee, when it was established. We have identified papers there that need to be updated, not all of them. So yes, we'll circulate the updated version of those papers to members of the committee so that you are kept up to date. So yes, thank you for drawing attention to that.
That's great, thank you very much. So if we're content to accept the action sheet and those items that are completed to be removed from the action sheet going forward. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So to go back to the minutes then, and item 1.6 on the agenda, matters arising. Are there any matters arising any members would like to raise? No. Okay.
None from me, thank you, Tina.
Ruth, were you wanting to say something there?
No, I said none from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no matters arising, then we can proceed to the agenda, and it's down to me then for the chair's report for the stakeholder reference group. Now I was going to give a verbal report because there have been two stakeholder reference group review meetings. One was held on the 25th of April, which Ruth kindly attended for me because I was on holiday, and Ruth, I'm happy to give the report that you sent to me, and if you feel you want to say anything at the end that I've missed, please feel free to correct or intervene, and then I'll give an update of the meeting I attended at the stakeholder reference group on the 6th of June. So from the meeting held on the 25th of April, it was noted to be a positive and informative gathering, and noted as being potentially a very useful forum. They had a comprehensive and impressive presentation on health education improvements, work on equality and diversity, which received compliments, plus progress reports by Lisa on the developing education training plan and the strategic review phase 2. There was a need for the stakeholder reference group close involvement in both processes. That had been emphasised and has continued, I will say. A one-off meeting of the stakeholder reference group members on the emerging draft of the education training plan was to be held at the end of May. It was actually moved and was held on the 6th of June. The director of the RCM Wales asked for a clearer explanation of the interrelationships of health education Improvement Wales groups working on the SR phase 2, including how our own committee fits in, and an organogram was offered. I'm not too sure if that has had feedback from the group as yet as to whether they found that useful. Finally, Alex gave an update on the mental health strategy, which at that time was in consultation and had closed, and a great majority of comments were very supportive. We know from the board's perspective that that's now been submitted into Welsh Government. Ruth, was there anything else that I've missed off of your update?
Well, no, but I just would like to say I think that it's encouraging to see how well this committee is developing and embedding itself, and it's had some outstanding presentations from staff, really excellent, and I think that's given good payback because the sense of engagement increases every time we have a meeting. So for the future, I think it's looking positive and having been a really good step. It is important that this committee, the Education Subcommittee, keeps very close to the business, and having you there, Tina, as Vice Chair, and reporting back, I think will be increasingly important as we go forward. But there's nothing specific that I particularly want to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Going forward then, I also attended a meeting of the same group, as I said, on the 6th of June. And I felt the meeting was extremely well attended, with in excess of 60 people from our stakeholders represented on that group. And that didn't include some of the apologies. So it's quite a wide and inclusive membership. The programme on that particular date included a presentation by Julie Rogers on compassionate and collective leadership, with a re-emphasis on our own HIW strategic aim, building upon compassionate collective leadership, especially in terms of capacity and at all levels. And there was an ask from the group to help to get it embedded, and also to denote the impact that it would have on the front line. So that's significant to note that stakeholders are involved in the strategic leadership agenda and that they're seeking to help us impact it at frontline. So it's leadership at all levels. There was also an outline of the education training plan and changes, and an update was requested by Lisa that once these were circulated again on the 17th of June, if there was any feedback needed, that she was happy to receive it. And a request was made during the group meeting that healthcare sciences should be included in the prescribing and also the ultrasound agenda, which I think was interesting. Hopefully that's been taken forward. And a comment made by HAW and Social Care Wales Plan supported the integrated approach, especially around occupational therapists and nursing within the community. The confirmed timeline of the committee would receive the plan on the 15th of July, and the board then would have it by the 28th of July, and it would then be forwarded to the Welsh Government on the 29th. An update was also given by our CEO, Alex, in relation to the mental health workforce strategy, the work that was undertaken and the board approval. I think it was important to note that over 82% of the people who responded gave an immense positive response to the consultation process and the recommendations made within the mental health strategy. And I know from the board, we also felt that at the board, but from a stakeholder reference group to have that feedback, I think is extremely positive, because I didn't pick up any negatives about the consultation, which showed that there is engagement. So really pleased with that outcome of that report. So unless there's any questions for Ruth or myself on those two areas, it's a verbal report because this is my first meeting as chair. But at the next meeting, I hope to be able to give a written report, given that I'll have a little bit more time involved in that. So any questions? Okay. Hope you can hear me. I've had a dental extraction yesterday, so I've got a bit of pain in my mouth at the moment. So if I get a bit hoarse, I will hand over to Jill, but hopefully not. And excellent care, I will say too. So.
We can hear you fine. We can hear you fine. Or I can.
Anyway. So moving on then to part two of the agenda, the education performance and quality and the multi-professional education and training quality assurance update. And Push, is that you presenting on that?
Yeah, that's correct, yes. Thank you, Chair. Can I just mention something? Were we supposed to do declarations of interest at the start?
Yes. We did do, yeah.
Did we? Okay, fine. I must have missed that. I was having trouble getting my the mute removed from my system. So, okay. So the multi-professional education training quality assurance updates. The first one, the medical one, is a bit longer than we would normally have because there's been a gap and a delay in the education committee, and a number of visits have happened which had a material impact on some of this report. So it is the report that we've framed in the way that we are developing our quality framework within HIW. So if I go through it step by step, you can see in the introduction all of the headings that we're going to be following. So first of all, quality planning. We're looking at our expectations agreements with all our education providers. And we're reviewing all of these because they're probably due for a review as the changes have happened with COVID and the changes in the way we interact with our trainees and our trainers. So that's a work in progress. I hope you can't hear my dogs in the background. Excuse me a second. Let me just shut them up. Apologies. When my wife leaves, the rest of them decide to have a bit of a chorus, which He's extremely distracting, but anyway. So our commissioning meetings have all been completed now with our education providers. There will be a report coming to a subsequent education committee of what we learned from that and how it went. However, as we were attempting before COVID hit, we've tried to extend it to a multi-professional agenda with a view and giving all of them a year's warning that that's what we want to do next year, so that in the same way that we talk about commissioning of medical numbers, which is a requirement of ours with the GMC, we want to do something similar about some of the other professional areas. And I know I can see Margaret's on the call, and I think we would welcome it in some of our other deaneries, because I think it's important to be able to have that conversation at a senior level with our colleagues in the service. So that's a work in progress too, and that's where we're heading for next year. The faculty specialty and simulation heading. So there's a medical education leads portal that was launched on the 1st of April. And this gives resources and information to our training leads. And the feedback so far has been very positive. So we're really pleased about that. There's been a number of meetings that we've also hosted from the quality unit, and networking meeting with faculty leads, medical education managers, first type of meeting we've had post-pandemic for that. A second faculty leads and special leads forum on the 22nd of June. So a number of, and of course, the annual simulation conference was held virtually on the 29th with an international attendance and speakers, which was very well received. There's a joint simulation event planned with Aberystwyth University. So there's a number of areas there. Also on simulation, where we've created a working group to look at how we develop the interprofessional simulation-based education program, because we think that's a crucial part of taking forward simulation. And also we've set up a forum to look at how we integrate immersive technologies that are emerging into the education training process through simulation. So lots happening in this area. We're a partner in the Wales Virtual Hospital in Cardiff. So I think at some point I'm going to be asking them to come and do a presentation to this group to give an update of where we have got to. So maybe the December meeting we could think about doing that. The postgraduate education support review. So this is quite a task, actually. It's to do with how we fund postgraduate centres. And previously, it was the medical deanery that provided support to postgraduate medical centres, but inevitably, many of those centres are not medical, they are multi-professional. So how that fits and how that works probably needs a bit of untangling. It may be difficult, because how do you take something out of something that you're already putting money into? But I think it's really important that this has a little bit of scrutiny. So we're looking at that at the moment. We've had a series of meetings with both our internal colleagues and some of our stakeholders to look at how we're going to do that. So we know that money is following trainees, and it's done in a fair and equitable manner. There's an all-Wales simulation strategy that's being developed. We had a deep dive with the exec team on this, and we're coming to the final stages of developing that strategy. And I'm sure that when we invite them here in the future, they will talk about that. Is there anything on that section before I move on to educational governance?
Yeah, can I just pick up a couple of things?
Certainly.
Okay, and I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask it, because it links to Margaret's paper as well. So it's about the commissioning, really. And obviously there's been a whole pile of really important meetings with the health boards, and it links a little bit to, I guess, the take-up
on the pharmacy technicians, which seemed a little disappointing, really, from the health board. So I just wondered the outcome from some of those meetings. What are the sort of key actions? Because I know you said that we flagged that this is going to be the conversation next year, but next year will come quite quickly, won't it? So I just wondered what they were doing, or what influence we have over them, or influence perhaps is the wrong word, but levers to actually make the whole thing gel a bit better.
Yeah. So if I explain the origin of these meetings, these were medically focused only, and it was a requirement of the GMC that we had a strict agenda to have a yearly meeting with our education providers, in which we raised issues of finance, of overall governance, and how many posts we were putting into that health board, and what we expected them to do. So that's the origin of where these meetings were happening. Prior to COVID, Alex quite rightly suggested that we, if we're meeting with senior colleagues, we shouldn't just be talking about medicine, we should be talking about the other professionals. And we were on the way to doing that prior to COVID hitting, but with COVID happening, we had to defer that development, and that's where we're restarting now. So how it'll look, I think that depends on, first of all, what I would say is that all of the health boards understood and accepted that it was a better use of our time to look at the multi-professional agenda. What we would do in advance of any such meetings is put on the table what our issues were, what we wanted to discuss. And then it's for the education providers to make sure that the right people are there to be able to discuss those issues. I'm not sure, is it pharmacy technicians or pharmacy foundation that is the, because I think there's been issues with both.
I think it's low on the technicians.
Yeah, but there's some health boards that have been particularly low on pharmacy foundation as well. So yes, I think it's really important that we have those discussions, but if we set the agenda in advance and we've told them that's what we're going to do, then I think we're in a better position to start having those conversations next year. And I didn't find a single health board balked against that. They actually welcomed it. So I think it'll depend on how we set the agenda and what information we put out and the things that we want to discuss.
Okay. Yeah. Malcolm?
Just a further comment on that, and thanks, Bush. I think you set the history of the commissioning quite well. What we were thinking about within the quality unit in the medical deanery was taking that forwards, and actually commissioning is just part of a cyclical process.
Yeah,
it goes from one year to the next, and moving it away from just a point in time where we have a meeting to discuss what's happened and to think about what could happen. Actually see that just as the starting point and ending point of the circle and the cycle, if you like. So I think rather than say, well, this is the agenda, it's just summarizing where we are, but not actually being a fixed point in time. And if you look in the paper, you'll see that we're trying to reduce the administrative burden for the commissioning, and that's because all the information which is shared should already be known by both sides. And we're trying to make it an iterative process rather than a point in time, if you like. And I think, although we're doing that within medicine and trying to, I don't think there's any reason why the other groups shouldn't do that at the same time. And I know Margaret probably does take that on board as a,
yeah. I think we're going to be at different stages in different professional areas, aren't we, Malcolm? Because we haven't done this with pharmacy before, whereas we've done it with dental. But there'll also be some conversations from the multi-professional basis of background as well, of how our undergraduate nurses and midwives and other professionals are being managed within the health board. So I think there's they're all going to have different positions, if you like, and different needs, and at different stages of maturity in how our conversations are going to be with the health boards on that. And actually ties in with some of the other things that I'm involved with is assessing their ability or their status as university organizations. So I think that's another part of the jigsaw. Margaret, I think your hand's up.
I can't, oh yeah, Margaret.
Just quickly, because I don't want to keep the conversation going any longer, because I know you've got a busy agenda. But in your comment, Jill, I think it is we've really got to do quite a piece of work around pharmacy to raise the profile, because we're sort of under the radar, and that's been very clear through conversations with people outside of pharmacy. So pharmacy's been quite just deal with their own problems, and they're quite a sort of siloed way of approach. And we have a plan that this year we've got to start thinking about how do we start having conversations outside of pharmacy, because there's a great demand on the workforce, but we don't seem to get that articulated further up. And when you actually talk to other people about how limited our training is, or being limited for whatever reason, people want to know why, want to try and find solutions. So it is going to be work in progress this year, Jill, and it will be as part of the commissioning that we can raise the profile again. But I think we need to do more legwork outside of the commissioning meetings as well to get pharmacy on the agenda and think about where we can do training outside of the pharmacy department and where there are opportunities for multi-professional training. So it's on our agenda, and we do have to try and we will be getting on it in the next few months.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks.
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Well, Push, I thought there were a lot of interesting points in this part of the paper, which reflect a sort of sense of moving on in a way, and the LEP expectations agreement is part of that. I'm just interested because this originally started under a GMC hat, and yet we're moving on into thinking that we want a multi-professional component. I think it's important that we don't lose some space for the medical discussion, as well as having a multi-professional element. And I just wonder whether the other regulators are interested, or to what extent they might be useful, or it might be useful to them in terms of building some kind of interregulatory understanding. So that was a general comment. The specific question I've got is, does the question of facilities and space for training come up in these meetings? Yes. I increasingly hear about the pressure on physical space, and it also links to what you're doing with the postgraduate education support.
Yeah.
In the postgrad facilities. Is that tied up in this?
So I would suggest that the contribution to the postgraduate facilities from the medical side is disproportionate to the size and the use of those facilities. Not that it matters in my mind; it's all coming from one place, isn't it? The money. And postgraduate facilities are required for all the professional areas. I know that, for example, in Morriston, the majority of funds came from within the health board and from the university to develop the education centre. There was a regular amount of funding coming from the deanery, which still goes there. But the old postgrad centre was almost fully funded by the deanery money, whereas the new one is now funded by a different set of resources. So we've probably got that sort of mix and difference in origin across the whole of Wales. So I think it's a question of almost having a tariff-based contribution, perhaps, based on the number of trainees that people have. But we're exploring that, and we're thinking about what's the best way of doing that.
I think that's interesting.
And the other thing about not losing medicine, you're right. People talk about leveling up rather than bringing things down to the lowest common denominator. I don't think we're ever going to lose that. But in a way, there shouldn't be any surprises from a medical point of view when we meet with the health boards, because we're doing the quality management all year round. So it's not a time to be raising an issue of quality at that point, because they should already know it. We will touch on it in those meetings, but in fact, the main issue is to satisfy what the GMC requires of us. When you talk about other regulators, we would like them to do more. I think it's fair to say we've got an opportunity for the pharmacy regulator to have a bigger input into the foundation year, as they do at undergraduate level. So I think we will explore all of that. The General Dental Council has a different set of criteria. It doesn't work in the same way as the others, although they did do a quality visit on our specialty training last year. We've talked to them about changing their the way they regulate. It's fallen on deaf ears so far. So despite us welcoming them, they're going on their own merry way, I'm afraid. I've asked for an MOU with them and I can't get anywhere with it. So
we can keep trying.
You can keep trying, yeah.
Chair, can I finally say how would welcome another update at some point on simulation, because it seems to me from reading the report that there's an awful lot going on there.
Yeah,
and we need to keep
that's true.
to that.
And it's a really important part of how we educate in the future. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ruth. So an update on simulation going forward, but Kirsty, do you want to?
Just in reference to Push's point about the GDC, that in terms of the postgraduate training, specialty training is the only postgraduate training they have regulatory oversight for. Although we do have multidisciplinary meetings regarding the others, but that's the only ones they have any oversight for. So it's really challenging to get them engaged in any quality assurance. But we're moving into the education training standards aligned with the GMC, because I think it's a really good thing to do, and we will have our own quality framework regardless of the regulator now, so just to provide some assurance there.
Yeah,
Helpful to know, because it means public protection is the role of the regulator, but our commitment to the educational agenda is also important. Do you want to say something?
No, Prashant's point.
Okay. Okay, Push. So are there any other points of clarification or update with that? Push, do you want to?
I'll continue if that's okay. So from a quality management perspective, we're considering the responses of trainee exit surveys completed by trainees who are voluntarily leaving medical training, and incorporating that into our quality management processes moving forward. Because I think it's really important to understand why people leave, as well as when people continue. So I think for somebody to leave medical training, I think is a really important thing to understand. From an exceptions reporting point of view on where we are with enhanced monitoring cases, obstetrics and gynecology in Prince Charles and Royal Glamorgan remains in enhanced monitoring. We're waiting to see that the improvements that they have made, and we last visited on the 17th of November, that the improvements they have made are maintained and sustained. That's one of the requirements of the GMC, that they don't just see things have got better, that they stay better. There are some improvements around the A&E pathways but they need to be maintained and still addressed. And we're pleased that access to ultrasound, whilst improving, will need to be sustained too. So that's where we're looking at that, and there's another visit planned in autumn of this year. Similarly, medicine, which was placed into enhanced monitoring for a variety of reasons, mainly to do with workload preventing training opportunities. And it was because that was a chronic problem rather than any individual sudden event that they were placed in enhanced monitoring. We think that despite the pressures within medicine during COVID, we felt the progress is being made, and we are going to plan another visit there, probably before the end of this year. But we're pleased with the way that that's been engaged with. Emergency medicine in Morriston remains in enhanced monitoring too. There was a number of concerns about supervision, pediatric experience, and the training environment that put them into enhanced monitoring. A visit happened on the 16th of May. And there were some areas which had improved. Pastoral support was better. There were better staffing levels in pediatrics. Therefore, the clinical support there was better, and the education was improved. There were still areas where we felt that needed to be improved and maintained. Was the induction process, widening access for the teaching of for teaching and for minor injuries, and the heavy workload that all emergency departments are having and the impact that they are going to have on training. So I think there's a number of things that would need to still change, and we've asked for an action plan and a further visits plan for November of 2022. Trauma orthopedics, you can tell probably from the narrative that this is under quite heavy scrutiny, with the GMC writing to the chair last December about some of the concerns, and them attending the meeting that the visit that we had on 21st of June. And whilst there's evidence of overall improvement, there's still a number of concerns that need to be addressed. And we were particularly, the particular concern is that of clinical experience in theatres. And whilst that's a countrywide and a UK-wide problem, particularly during COVID, it seems particularly worse here. So that's one of the things that we want to keep an eye on. So we'll do another visit before the end of the year or early next year. And we're still requiring the health board to give us monthly updates to show what the state of play is. And Aaron Bevan, as you are aware, that we decided to put an oversight group along with the health board to look at trainee concerns across the patch, following the reconfiguration of services that were hastened by COVID. Essentially, the Grange became one of the Nightingale hospitals to deal with the issues there. Things have moved on, and we're having fairly focused conversations on the number of medical rotas, the duration of those medical on-calls, because our original agreement had been with them that the other hospitals outside the Grange would not be all night on calls. And this obviously has an impact on our trainees and where they're distributed. So this remains a difficult issue to address. So I think there's still some further discussions to be had on that. I think if I was to step back and say, if we didn't have an oversight group in place, what would be our position? I suspect we would probably be thinking of medicine, certainly in some of the areas, being in enhanced monitoring. So at some point, I need to consider that and step down the oversight group and make it business as usual for medicine within an Aaron Bevan, because we're relatively content, Malcolm will correct me if I'm wrong here, with the other specialty training within an Aaron Bevan. So in a sense, whilst it was an oversight group to look at all training, it's now largely focused on medicine. So we've got another oversight group on the 9th of September, and there's, as you can see, further targeted visits to consider medicine in all of those three sites. Swansea Bay, we put this into the report simply because they're undergoing significant reconfiguration of their services, and inevitably these can have an impact on training. And as such, we want to be in on it at the start so that we make sure that training is not affected adversely by any of the reconfigurations. We actually think there might be some real positives in this with their reconfiguration, because I think our surgical trainees might end up having better opportunities with protected lists. So in a way, we not only want to look at concerns, we want to look at the good things and use that potentially as an opportunity to catch up for other trainees if the capacity allows. So, yep.
Can I just give a bit of an update on some of the things you just talked about?
Certainly, yeah.
To get them even more up to speed. So, Ogden Gynae in Prince Charles, you're quite right. We didn't meet. We did meet, but no trainees turned up, so we couldn't change anything. And that is a potential theme we've had over the last few weeks in targeted visits. There's a lack of training engagement, so we're trying to look at that and see what's going on there. That's just an overall concern we've got. But actually, the evidence we've got from that site is reasonably positive. And I'll mention the National Training Survey results from the GMC because we've seen them in the quality unit, but they're currently embargoed until next Tuesday. So I can't give any detail, but actually it looks as if the results from the NTS would support what we were planning to do at the last visit, which was likely remove enhanced monitoring or recommend the GMC do that. Obviously, we couldn't, but we're hopeful that the progress has been sustained and improved. I won't say more about medicine in Wrexham because there's not much more to say at the moment. The two sites in Morriston you mentioned, emergency medicine and trauma orthopedics, quite rightly, we're still concerned. There are plans, there are some improvements in both, but interestingly, ALCPs have also not long happened for both specialties. And there is a concern that actually emergency medicine in Morriston is a bit of an outlier compared to the others in terms of educational outcomes and the ability to implement the new curriculum in EM. So we need to work out how to triangulate the other data we're getting, because it looks as if EM is not perhaps moving quite as far forward as we thought. It was only going forward slowly. Trauma and orthopedics, similarly, you mentioned the UK-wide concerns about access to operating. It is particularly bad in Swansea compared to others, but they're getting lots of numbers because there's lots of trauma surgery. So it's maybe not quite as difficult as you might expect, but there are some other concerns about the department is under perhaps more pressure than some of the others around Wales. So we're still having a fairly close eye on that. We're not actually having to get reports every month. The GMC decided that was a bit too onerous a burden, because actually updates on a monthly basis weren't particularly helpful, because a lot of the changes being requested take longer to show evidence of change. And so we're going to ask for 3 monthly reports, which is a bit less burden for the health board, but still, enhanced monitoring. And I think you're right, Push. The other specialties are pretty much the same as other health boards. Things are ticking along nicely. Medicine is challenging, and we're currently going through a series of visits. We've had 2 visits in the last 2 weeks. There's another one next week. I think there is a real risk that we will probably end up putting medicine in an RMBEV into enhanced monitoring, because although there is change and there are plans, it's slow. And I think there is increasing evidence that delivery of good quality training across 4 sites and the way they're doing it is likely either not to be possible, or will take an awful lot more investment and resource and time before it will be adequate. So I think they will probably go into enhanced monitoring, but that's not up to us, and it isn't certain. But I'll give you feedback, obviously, before the oversight group. But it is. You're probably right. The oversight group may need to step down because it's just medicine. And I think you mentioned Swansea at the end, and I think that's quite right. Getting involved at the beginning is useful. The oversight group that they have set up has got some HIW involvement, but the concern I would say, just to raise it for this committee to be aware of, is that I think they only met for the first time last week and the week before, which is a long time after we suggested that they should be meeting, because the proposal for reconfiguration is this autumn, and there really isn't very much time to consider education. So I think that is a potential risk if they go ahead with the reconfiguration without having adequately considered the education impact. I don't think the risk is the same as it would have been for the Grange, because of course they're not adding a site. They're simply moving trainees around and departments around existing sites. So that is much more straightforward and should impact training less, but there will be an impact, and I think it needs to be considered adequately. And I don't know whether there's enough time, but that we'll wait and see. The other thing which isn't in this report, perhaps should have been, it's an oversight from our point of view, There was another department of enhanced monitoring, which was ophthalmology in the Royal Glam. And I'm pleased to say that we visited them recently, and the GMC have confirmed our recommendation that they can help with enhanced monitoring because they've made significant and sustained progress with further planning, which will make it even better. So they have really changed in terms of their approach. I mentioned the NTS, and as I said, I can't give you details on that, but I think overall Wales is looking very similar to the rest of the UK. There is a potential problem with burnout and fatigue, which won't surprise anybody, but there are higher levels of burnout in trainees and trainers, and it probably fits in with the HIW summit, which was held in May, reflecting sort of the situation probably for health professionals in all the other specialties as well. But we'll incorporate those data into our risk registers and take things forward. So unless anyone wants anything more than that, that's really just what I want to add to what you said there, Bush.
Thank you.
Bush.
Yep. So shall I take questions on this bit before I move on? If there are any.
Any questions? Anybody?
Okay.
Okay, there's just one for me in relation to the last comment about ophthalmology in the Royal Glamorgan, because it's not mentioned in the paper. Can we make sure that we record that push so that that come out of that, because there has been an oversight there. So thanks, Malcolm. Okay, push.
Okay, so the remainder of the paper is all about our quality improvement activity and our quality assurance externally. So I won't go through it in detail, but there's ongoing QI activity as across HIW as well as within our medical training. There is the one bit looking at some of our training progression outcomes is detailed in the QI for HIW. Small numbers of reviews and different outcomes for those, and they've been upheld. And the last bit on the quality assurance tells us how we're interacting with the GMC and how they want to engage with us as a part of the 2022 annual cycle. So we'll wait to see how that develops. We've got training events for lay representatives. If we look at how evaluation, research and innovation is progressing, we've developed our research governance group. So any research or anything that looks like research comes to the research governance group to be pointed in the right direction, that whether they need ethics or whether they don't. We've got an engagement with the ethics committee in Cardiff to look at our activity to see if it requires ethical approval. So I think there's some real positive aspects to how we're developing that bit of work. In addition, I mentioned this to Lisa yesterday, we are engaged with the faculty lead for multi-professional research from Healthcare Research Wales to look at opportunities for non-medical research opportunities from the other professions, and we're looking to do a pilot perhaps this year if we can identify funding for that, so that we can offer additional research opportunities sort of akin to the intercalated BSc that doctors have for other professional groups. So that is all part and parcel of what's happening with evaluation, research and innovation. So I think we're asking you to note this report and note that it uses our quality framework as a basis for reporting this. So apologies for taking so long, but there was a lot to cover today.
Thanks, Push. Just before we go on to note it, are there any final questions for Push? No? Okay, so as required in the paper, committees asked to note the report for information. Yeah, and note that this report uses multi-professional HIW quality framework workers basis for reporting quality unit activity. Yep.
Yes.
Just before I move on to yourself, Kirsty, just for points of clarification, Push, you mentioned at the beginning about declarations of interest and then went straight into it. I didn't get a chance to ask you.
Oh, sorry. I assumed that they were noted as being the usual ones, which is what the chair normally does in the board. So I have an honorary chair at Swansea Medical School.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks.
Excuse me, sorry, just on that, with regards to declarations of interest, I didn't pick that up at the beginning, so I'll just ask that we do confirm the declarations of interest with regards to the interest for universities when we are discussing phase 1 and phase 2 contracts. I'll highlight that as we consider them. I think there are 2 papers that are relevant today, but I'll highlight them just before they're presented.
Yeah, point of clarification, I did ask, were there any further declarations of interest? And I'm nodding around the room. So if technology didn't allow that to come through, apologies for that.
I'm sorry, I didn't pick that up. So I'll pick it up as we come to those agenda items, just to have bullets and braces.
Jill.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I don't want to prolong the discussion. I just wanted to just clarify, Push and Rhiannon, really, you referred to a piece of work on finance of postgraduate education, and they've got, do we know what the timescales for that is, when that's likely to come back to us?
Sorry, which one's that?
So in the postgrad medical and dental education, so it is one of the objectives in the INTP to look at the modernisation of funding models. So it is one of our one that we are taking forward. Chris Payne as the SRO with the medical deanery. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there will be sort of quarterly deliverables as a result of that. So they'll be reported through in the performance reports that come through to the board.
Okay. All right. Okay. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to clarify, then we're happy to note the report and the quality framework. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Push. Kirsty.
Thanks, Tina. So we'll take the report as read. I have a slight update from when the report was submitted. So Dental Foundation recruitment is currently live. We're in national recruitment for foundation training, dental foundation training with HEE and Northern Ireland. It's fair to say that Wales and Northern Ireland haven't fared particularly well in national recruitment this year. We've had a significant number of vacancies, particularly in West Wales, largely because the process and candidates not preferencing these areas. So there's a list A, which is UK graduates. There's a list B, which is rest of world. List B is, we're currently waiting for an announcement on list B, but we may have a significant number of rest of world appointed, which is fine. But we also may have vacancies. So I've met with the Chief Dental Officer and we're looking at ways we could recruit locally and make them more attractive, particularly for Welsh domiciles. So there's some plans for us to take that forward there. But that's currently live. We're awaiting an update today, so it's just for you to be aware of, really. Dental core training, similar in national recruitment for dental core training. We've got I think about 9 vacancies that we will recruit to locally, but that's a national issue. That's across because dental core training isn't a mandatory training. What trainees tend to do is they can apply to multiple and then withdraw late. So it's an ongoing problem that is shared across the UK. But we will recruit them locally. We do have that facility. Specialty, you can see there how many we've currently got. And in the education training plan, which I know is later, we've got a bid to significantly increase our specialty training cohort. Dental therapy foundation training, again, in the education training plan, we're planning to recruit to double the amount of dental therapy foundation training places in next year's scheme to accommodate a bulge graduates coming out of Cardiff. And given where dentistry is in the contract and primary care, etc., it would be great if we can boost that workforce in primary care. Hygiene therapy undergraduate commissioning, as is in the paper, and dental nurse training, which is a particular hot topic. And there's a huge workforce shortage. It's very complex, and I know we've discussed this previously. We have now had approval to run a one-off program from HIW, which we will do while we also work towards a wider commissioned program. Chief Dental Officer is involved in those discussions, and we've had some early conversations with Aberystwyth University and other providers regarding the facility to offer training on an all Wales basis. So we will continue those because there's a workforce shortage there. Quality management and governance, dental foundation training, timing's slightly off because our final RCPs are in the next couple of weeks. But early indications are that we potentially will have 3 extensions to training of the current cohort, which is fine, and we will accommodate those within our placements. And again, the same for core training. No indications of extensions yet, but the final RCPs are in the next few weeks. Clinical skills, the conversations around the reviews of the education centres, and we're very much involved in that. The funding mechanisms are very much involved in that review. Very complex for dentistry, mixed models that are of investment in place. The overheads are quite intensive for dentistry. We have clinical skills facilities and units in the centres to support training. Some that the health boards have funded, some that we funded over the years. It's a real complex position, but we're linking in. We've put in some capital investment into Welsh Government in previous years because there's no pot, as it were, that's available to support this. So that's all part of the work that's going on there, that we have to make sure we secure those facilities in the long term to continue being able to provide that hands-on simulation training for dentistry. So that is very much a live topic. Currently, at the moment, because we're not doing money study days, it's not such a big issue, but when we resume in September and all the programs restart properly, there potentially may be an issue if we're not allowed to accommodate all our cohorts of trainees. So for example, on dental foundation training, we might have a cohort of 12 or 13. If we have to halve that cohort to do the study days because of distancing requirements that are local, that has a significant impact that we may need to just manage. Regulatory, as I mentioned, the GDC doesn't have the same level of oversight, although we do meet with them regularly as part of as the stakeholders in terms of education and training. There's work going on with Health Education England and Dental Schools Council. As you can see there, on a remediation process, which is the first time this has happened. There's a lot of disquiet about whether they are actually safe practitioners and safe beginners when they graduate, because we don't have the foundation year in the same way as medical do. So they graduate, they register. What's happened this year that hasn't happened in previous years is more UK graduates have taken themselves out of the national recruitment process for dental foundation training, and we think they're going into private practice directly because there's a whole mixed economy going on. So there's some real challenges going on in dentistry that are emerging at the moment, which may have a long-term impact on our ability to train, but it's a national problem that we are all working. We're looking at the trends and the data and trying to identify where those graduates are going. Foundation training as it stands in dentistry is a performance list requirement for them to work in the NHS. If they don't want to work in the NHS, they don't need to do foundation training. So there's a real challenge in there, just to make you aware of. We don't, it's part of a national trend that we're seeing in dentistry, along with all the other workforce challenges that exist on the NHS and the mixed economy. The GDC are reviewing the learning outcomes for all of the dental teams. So the learning outcomes, they have to meet graduation, and there will be a consultation out in the autumn regarding those. So that ties in a little bit with the safe beginner conversation and discussion. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kirsty. Any questions for Kirsty? Ruth?
Just a quick one, and thank you, Kirsty. I've really begun to appreciate from your reports the multiple strands there are in dentistry. We used to focus on dentists, and just be getting a much clearer picture that this is so much more complex, and moving. Everything's moving at different paces, but it's all interacting and all interrelated. I have a very practical question, really, which is about the training outcomes. I just wanted to ask, is there a crib sheet somewhere? Because there are a number of them that you very helpfully put in brackets, 10.1 is COVID, but there's some of them I'm not sure about. And I think we've had this in a previous paper, but is there any way we can quickly use as a reference?
I will get, there is a crib sheet, and I will get it circulated to the committee. Absolutely.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Ruth. Okay, so we'll have that circulated, Kirsty. That's lovely.
Information medical ones are included as well, just in case they're different.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's two crib sheets going to go around now. One for medicine, one for dentistry. So for warned, Margaret, you might get the same question for pharmacy. Push, I see your hand up.
I'd just like to comment on the fact that we're starting dental nurse training this year, which is a first for us. You'd think that we would have been doing it already, but thanks to Kirsty for getting that up and running.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So the committee has asked to note the report. Can I just clarify for point of some of the papers? Some of the papers are asking the board to clarify. The board to note the report, and some for the committee. Can we just adopt a consistency so that here it should be the committee is note to ask to note the report for information? So can I ask the committee, are you happy to note?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so if I can move over to Margaret now for pharmacy.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to, rather than go through the report section by section, I wanted to give a sort of whole overview. So we supplied an appendix with our report to try and give the committee an understanding of the breadth of how the whole of the team engage with quality across all of our pieces of work. The paper only actually discusses our two formal programs, which is our trainee pharmacists and our pre-registration pharmacy technicians. But since the last committee meeting, the deanery has gone through every aspect of our work and mapped against the HIW quality framework to try and demonstrate that we consider quality in all of our work, both pre-registration, postgraduate, and CPD and CPD plus. So that was just to indicate to the committee that quality is embedded right across our deanery, and that we're trying now to have a very clear picture of how we touch all of these elements in every piece of work we do, our business as usual, as well as our formal programs. I wanted to particularly pick out the fact that we now, in our trainee pharmacist program, foundation program, we are now required to go through accreditation with GPHC against the new initial education and training standards for pharmacists that were introduced in September 2021. And I'm pleased to say in the report that we have been approved step 1 approval of that accreditation. This is a formal accreditation that wasn't in place prior to these new learning outcomes being agreed. We now move into step 2, which will mean that we need to have even more robust procedures. We already have many of the processes, but we do have to start doing additional reporting against the step 2 accreditation, which will be in March 2023. So our activities within quality are increasing exponentially as we move into different world for pharmacy, both having more formal reporting to the regulator, but also, as Jill mentioned, having a more formal relationship with our service providers, which hasn't necessarily been in place in the past. So certainly with our community pharmacy colleagues and GP practices, to some extent, we've had that quality relationship with the acute sector, but not in the sort of very quite structured way that we are having now. So that is a change for our training providers, and it is work in progress. But as Jill alluded to, we do have to start going through a quality cycle and them understanding what we expect of them as quality training sites. The second point to note is that we will be moving into now a different world with our undergraduate funded clinical placements, which will be commencing as a pilot in the next academic year. That will require HIW to have additional quality role in partnership with our 2 universities, Schools of Pharmacy, Swansea and Cardiff. That means we'll have to again move up a step to be able to establish those quality processes. And we are currently writing that expectation agreement with our HEIs, and we will have a similar agreement with our what will be our approved HEIW training sites. The expectation is that undergraduate clinical placements will only funded undergraduate clinical placements will only take place in HIW quality approved sites. So that is a piece of work we already have established that through our foundation, but we need to find a much wider spread of quality sites to be able to receive undergraduate clinical placements. Literally this week, to have a demonstration of how we work in partnership with our HEIs, we have been part of the Step 4 accreditation of Swansea School of Pharmacy literally yesterday. They have had, well, this perhaps isn't for minuting, but informally, they have said they've been successful. It needs to go back to the regulator to have that approved. But the panel did say informally that they were very happy with and were going to recommend to move to Step 5 at Swansea. But we were part of that accreditation process. We sat with the school, people within the school, to actually demonstrate how we are working in partnership to establish and ensure quality undergraduate clinical placements. And in the reverse, when we do our Step 2 accreditation with the GPHC for our foundation year, we will invite the universities to sit on our panel to demonstrate a reciprocal quality partnership. With response to commissioning numbers that Jill mentioned, it is a challenge. We are struggling to get capacity. We could definitely train more people. There is an appetite to train more people from the need of the workforce, but it is a challenge with regards to, particularly in the acute sector, to get people to be accepting of the numbers. So there is a disparity between what's appearing in IMTPs and then what they're actually saying they can take. So we've got a lot of work to do around supporting people to increase capacity. There is nervousness in the system around what does the undergraduate clinical placements look like. So we're constantly more and more asking more and more of our training providers, and therefore there's some element of nervousness about all of the change and all that's coming down the track, and how do we make sure we can cope with everything we're being asked for. So hopefully as we go on this journey, we'll start to smooth out that anxiety, and we can move ourselves into a different place, which is the real need, because we have a workforce crisis in pharmacy. I'm not saying we're unique. I know that's across a lot of professions, but we've got community pharmacies closing. We've got services being restricted in the acute sector. So we do need to find solutions to be able to train more people in a quality and safe way. So I wasn't really going to go any more than through the paper, etc. Hopefully it's self-explanatory, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Jill has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Margaret, I think this probably applies to other professions, so I'm not particularly picking on pharmacy, but there are so many changes in pharmacy and new roles, and that applies equally to other professions. And what's going through my mind is not just the commissioning, it's about how are we preparing the rest of the workforce for the change in terms of what we're churning out, as it were. So we're training different types of professional, which is exactly what we should be doing. But if they land somewhere where everybody goes, well, we don't want any of them, but, you know, we're quite happy with what we had. I'm sure there's loads of work going on, so I don't want to, you know, sort of take up the whole meeting. But there's a bit about how are we retraining everybody else about what we're delivering. So it isn't just about pharmacy. So sorry, Margaret, you can answer for everything.
No, that's fine, Jill. So at the moment, we have a large piece of work under a strategic objective in the IMTP plan to actually start describing the pharmacy workforce of the future and describing the roles and what the services should look like, and therefore what are the roles that and what's the training that's needed to be able to deliver those services. You are right, as we're literally in the midst of that at the moment. We have had discussions with all of our employers and partners and stakeholders. The next step is to start having those discussions outside of pharmacy. So with, and one of the benefits of being in that those commissioning meetings, whilst they weren't multi-professional, I attended the quality commissioning meetings. What was really interesting was that when I sort of had my little section on there, how many people were enthused with what's happening in pharmacy, but didn't actually know what was happening. And that is, I suppose, it's a concern, but we need to address it. So we do need to go and talk to more people about what's happening, what the opportunities are, talk to workforce and OD colleagues about, how this could actually, you could use these people to do so much more for your patients in a multidisciplinary team. So we've identified that, and that's a piece of work over the next few months from a pharmacy perspective will definitely be happening.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks. Lisa?
Yes, and to echo what Margaret is saying, it's a very good question, Jill, and it's absolutely important. And I think what we need to do is give you assurance that as we are developing these education commissions, it's not done without the support and the engagement of health boards and service to understand what the implication and the impact would be on the current workforce. I mean, Margaret has got a really good example of independent prescribing, and we're all this is going to happen for nurses as well, where new graduates are going to come out with what we called prescriber ready, needing to do other things as well. But we're very mindful that we need to make sure that the workforce currently in existence embraces these new developments, these new workforce transformations, in order that they support them and take them forward. So I can assure you that as we develop a number of new courses, we are looking at what the current workforce is doing, but how are they going to not adopt, but actually embrace these new roles going forward. So thank you for that, Jill. It's a good question.
Thanks, Lisa. Margaret, I think that's an important area, and I just wondered, with regards to the Train Work Live campaign and the careers bill with NHIW, presumably we're totally clued into that with regards to the needs of the pharmacy workforce going forward. And I know the Audit Office is also going to be looking at workforce agenda across the whole of Wales over the next year. So I think some of that information and the potential needs to be highlighted as well, so that we can actually start to get not necessarily a deep dive, but some answers to some of the questions that you've raised in terms of securing workforce in the future. The other thing that I would also mention that, Lisa, in relation to nursing, I mentioned at the last strategic reference group, there's a question for occupational therapists and other scientists to be kept in the loop with independent prescribing. So if we could look at that as well, so that we're actually looking at the multi-professional approach, we're grateful for that. Thank you. So, Push.
Thank you, Chair. I think this, we shouldn't underestimate what a change this is. That medicine and dentists have been prescribers on registration. This is the first profession that has been added to that list, as in pharmacy. And you're right, we can't waste it. So we've got a big piece of work to do with all of our other professional colleagues to see what opportunities there are for pharmacists to complement what's already out there in services, but to use the additional skills they'll get from this new program, because the opportunities to me are almost endless with the overlap that they could have. So I think you're right to say, so we're training them, what we're getting for it, and I think that's a really valid question. applies to all skills that we train, but this one particularly, because as Margaret said, almost pharmacy has gone under the radar. They don't have a representative on the exec teams across our organisations, whereas they used to in the old health authorities. So in a way, we've got to raise their profile to make sure that we make best use of these new skills.
Okay, thank you, Push. I'm aware of time. It's 10:15 and we've still got nursing and health professional education. But can I, before we move on, Margaret, can I just thank you on behalf of the committee, because it's evident of a huge amount of work going on there with all these particular changes that you are on top of. But the committee, and again in the paper, it's the committee, not the board, is asked to note this report for information. Happy to note the report for information, and to note the new format for reporting the quality management in pharmacy, and also to note the reporting style will evolve and change in the future. Okay, so
Tina, can I just, I'll have my hand up, but can I just come back in very quickly? Not to delay us, but to say I totally support the discussion about the wider awareness, but we mustn't forget the public and patients and the wider world, because if they don't understand, this is going to have real difficulty. And to get messages coming back this week through the Vice Chair's meeting, for example, that there is just a complete lack of understanding among the general public about where the direction of travel for pharmacy, and it would merit some stepped up effort. And I'm sure that's something Margaret's aware of, but it's a component of the awareness raising that we were already discussing for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you. So moving on, Lisa.
Yeah, okay. Bore da pawb, good morning, everybody, and thank you. So what you've actually got is a quality assurance report from nurses and health professional education. And I'm very mindful of time. So, but it's important to highlight that as Push said, this report is a bit longer than actually anticipated because of the length of time since the last meeting. So just to highlight to you, in terms of quality planning, one of the most significant areas currently that we are looking at is obviously the implementation of the new pre-registration contracts, which we need to celebrate because they are about to go live in August, September of this year. And a vast amount of work has been undertaken in order to prepare and work with HEIs to make sure those contracts are ready, and obviously applicants are available to those contracts, which start this year. So obviously the Education Commission Quality team have been working, as I said, extensively with HEIs to prepare to make sure that the quality of those programs are ready, that applicants can apply to them. And obviously what we've highlighted here is a number of the risks that we've encountered as well. And it's quite clear as you look at these. So this is about being quite clear with you about the engagement that we've had with the HEIs to mitigate those risks and improve them as well. So here's a summary of the risks. And as I said, just highlighting here, we have Bangor distance learning. This was one that is due to, and there's an error in the paper there, it's not September, it was due to start in January 2023, and now we've looked at it for spring 2023, which is probably about March. And this was an area that we've worked with them. It doesn't inhibit the programme starting in that time scale, but obviously it meant that we had to work harder with them to understand that. Picking up again on the University of South Wales, and there's a bit more detail further in the programme in terms of the quality assurance on the work that we've undertaken with the University of South Wales regarding their midwifery programme, and I'll pick that up later as well. And more importantly, so we've got new providers of education, and they've come into this arena as a result of that recommissioning, and therefore we've had to work with them to make sure that they were absolutely ready. We're quite excited Aberystwyth and Glyndŵr, they have worked really hard. Their programs are innovative, they're different, and of course the key here is we're delivering the education closer to where people are living. So I'm happy to pick up at any key issues that you arising from that. Interprofessional placement learning, this was one aspect that we actually embedded into the contract. We wanted actually all our universities to deliver an element actually of their programme in an interprofessional capacity. It's fair to say that has actually challenged them, but actually nevertheless, we've worked with them and the health boards as well to explore those opportunities. So this is a big step in terms of that multi-professional learning arena back in the health board setting. One actually that we probably wouldn't have thought about is actually cyber essentials. Once again, within that contract, we were trying to make sure that our sort of HEIs were safe and upholding the regulations. Since those contracts were awarded, there have been actually additional elements into the cybersecurity requirements. This has been an extra challenge, and we've been working with DHCW and actually our digital team within HEIW to make sure that actually these HEIs are upholding some of those standards. It has been a challenge, but we are now actually arriving at a good position. So moving on, I then actually wanted to pick up with you the importance of the existing pre-registration contracts. We mustn't forget those because they will continue until actually obviously 2024, and it's actually making sure that actually the quality and the outcomes for learning for students are not lost, because these are providers who are not actually carrying on actually with these contracts. So this is actually an example of actually where we are working with those HEIs to maintain that quality. We've seen actually some movement actually of tutors, as you can imagine, from one actually HEI to the other, but we've been very mindful of working with them to make sure that that quality actually transfers as well. I won't dwell on it because I think we've touched on elements of clinical placements. I can't underestimate it, that this is the foundation of good quality education, and this is actually in a multi-professional arena. So much work has been undertaken in order to look at actually the placement opportunities that we've got, to understand actually whether they've been actually used effectively and efficiently, what the opportunities are to create better and actually wider sort of placement in different arenas. And this has been an exciting time, a massive willingness actually from our health boards to engage with us, to explore this. And it's fair to say this is a big foundation for all our programmes. If we had more placements, we could probably commission more education places, but we're very mindful of the capacity needed, and we don't want to saturate actually the system where we don't give that quality education to our sort of students. So many fora have been established in order to discuss this on a wide scale. And here you can see actually the examples of actually what we've undertaken. The placement actually opportunities and the quality standards that we're actually introducing actually into our placements is absolutely key. And I'm very pleased to say it does mention actually down there that we're actually obviously going to be signing local level agreements actually with all our HEIs in order to ensure they deliver that. I can say that those have been finally signed and they're on their way to the HEIs as well. I will not underestimate the engagement that we've had with HEIs to make sure the quality of those programmes and the placements are fit for purpose. I can honestly say as well that we presented the work that HEIW have undertaken actually in regards to placements at a national conference. This was a UK-wide conference, and Simon, who actually leads on this piece of work, dare I say, I won't say he was the warm-up act, but he was actually on stage just before Jeremy Hunt. So you could argue that he was actually that warm-up act. But actually this is where we heard, you know, how placements are taken forward actually in Scotland, in England and Wales, and we were on that national stage too. And you will hear the presentation. We are going to give a presentation on these pieces of work at our annual general meeting of HEIW in July too. So moving on, because I'm conscious of time, the other element is actually that was talking about strategic review phase 1, which was the pre-registration contracts. We're also undertaking the review of the commissioning of all our post-reg contracts, and there is actually a separate paper, which I'll come on to later, which describes actually all of that work as well. So moving on, in terms of supporting learners, this is why we are doing this. In other words, we are supporting learners in order that they actually gain that quality education to deliver safe and quality care to our patients. That is the fundamental. So this is an example of actually what we've been doing in terms of engaging with our students. And I can report actually that the national student scores have recently been published. These are for 2021. And we will be bringing a report back to the next committee detailing actually what actually is happening. What I can honestly say in the short term that these have been published, we are already engaging actually with our HEIs to understand what that means in relation to their students and whether there are any improvements that we can put in place as well. And moving on to quality assurance, actually this describes the areas of work and the detail of the work that we undertake actually with HEIs in relation to, making sure their programs are fit for purpose. And picking up on there actually at 3.35, you will see actually the work that we're currently undertaking with the University of South Wales in terms of their midwifery education. It was brought to our attention in April that there were some actually challenges actually for that programme. We immediately got in touch actually with that HEI and basically actually undertook actually to work with them to ensure actually the content and actually that their sort of midwifery students could transition alongside the rest of midwifery students across the whole of Wales. We've now received a very detailed improvement plan from University of South Wales detailing actually how they are going to take that forward. And this will be closely monitored by our sort of quality team to make sure that that is implemented in the timescales that we need it. The engagement actually with the University of South Wales has been very positive, and we've already seen significant improvements as a result of that intervention. In terms of 3.4, the work on regulation, my gosh, this is a busy arena at the moment, extremely busy indeed. So there's been a lot of work actually with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, where actually effectively we are a key stakeholder. And as one can imagine, that regulatory body has been reviewing actually our sort of regulation for nursing standards as a result of coming out of the EU. So as a result of that, what we've actually detailed in this report, the impact and the decisions that have been agreed. It mentions in the report that it went to their May committee. It did go and it was approved. So those are the changes that we've implemented as a result of coming out of the EU regulations. Much work has actually been done in terms of post-registration regulation as well. And you will see there that they've produced new updated post-registration standards for specialist community public health nursing and actually specialist practice standards as well. And we are currently working actually with our HEIs to actually review the current provision in order that these become actually implemented in Wales as well. And we've also been actually very busy with the healthcare professional councils in terms of actually working with them to make sure that all their standards and all their regulations are meeting the timescales so that all our sort of programs can be delivered to start actually in September as well. There was some delay, but by actually contacting them directly, this is raised to us by the HEIs. By contacting them directly, we've actually overcome that, and we are actually sort of quite actually confident that all those programs will have passed that regulation by the time that they go live. It will not inhibit it at all. So I'm actually asking actually the committee to consider this report as assurance actually and for information. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions?
Sorry, Chair, I don't want to prolong the discussion. I've just got a couple of questions, Lisa. One's left field, the other one's related totally to the paper. The first
question is about the risks of the HEIs and the new programmes.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's loads of work going on, but I guess my question is about, is there any comeback from those who didn't win the contract, who could have delivered if we've got to delay on some of the programmes of the new? So are we at any risk of somebody saying, well, we've done that? And
it's a good question, Jill, and that is always in the back of our mind when we are working with our current HEIs to make sure that they are complying with what they've agreed to do in the contract. And when we actually are looking at those risks, we are very mindful that we must sort of implement these, because you're absolutely right. There would have been another sort of applicant for that contract could say, well, you didn't deliver this and we could. But no, that is taken into account when we actually look at all our risks, but we're very confident that we will not have any comeback. That is something that we discuss in our programme board. And obviously we've got our procurement colleagues around that table, making sure that is minded as well. So I'm fairly confident that we will not have any comeback at you, Jill.
The other question is very quick, I've asked this loads of times, so I think, so the healthcare and social, healthcare support worker, in brackets health, did we give consideration to support worker social, in brackets, or a hybrid, which would obviously be something that could, somebody who could work across both fields? So is there such a programme in place? I'm just thinking of our health and social care strategy.
So the tender that is going to come to the closed part of this session is specifically around healthcare support workers for nursing. But I'll honestly say to you, Jill, that working with health and social care is a key area that we are continuing to do. And there's a lot of work being undertaken to understand how we've actually developed a joint induction programme for health and social care workers at that level already, and that is being implemented. There is more work to undertake in terms of the we've done a lot of work on healthcare support workers for nurses and other health professions as well, for instance, occupational therapists and physiotherapists, and we are engaged with social care to see how we actually can sort of work with them as well. There is an issue in terms of pay arrangements and the way that they're employed as well. So it is quite complicated.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. I think in addition to that, there's also the added agenda that they're now being regulated, aren't they, from this year? So compliant with the regulatory agenda is also something to include. Just one question from me, Lisa, and it's in relation to the HIW risk register, where we have the midwifery training that you mentioned earlier, and the assurances you've got. Are we in a place where we could recommend to the board that comes off the corporate risk register now? Are we at that place, or do you still think it should remain?
I would suggest that it remains for a little longer, because we received the plan at the end of June, and I need more time to make sure that is progressing. I would advise that we keep it on for another session.
We'll put it on to the next agenda then for review and an update.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I intended to bring, Tina, is that an update to the next meeting.
Great, thanks very much. So if there are no further questions, the committee is asked to note this report for assurance. People content to do so. Okay, thank you. I'm well aware that this is my first time chairing this meeting. I've allowed us to go over into our break, but so we're going to take a break, and we were to have the break and come back at 10:30. So are people happy to have a 10-minute break? Is that reasonable, David, do you think? David?
Sorry, come back in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. People are content. We'll come back at just before 1:45. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
1 minute to go, isn't there? And then we'll see everybody write applications.
I've already sent it.
Oh, well, then I don't know.
I sent it to Cal. I sent it to Cal. Sure.
Oh, that's fine. I'll send
That's
it.
quick.
Yeah, I'll send it to Kathy. I don't know.
It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much time. But the medical ones are, well, they've been around for a long
That
time.
was probably much the same.
And outcome 1 is satisfactory. Outcome 2 is unsatisfactory progress, but no extra time needed. Outcome 3 is extra time needed. Outcome 4 is off program. Outcome 5 is a temporary one based on need for more evidence.
Yeah.
Outcome 6 is satisfactory completion of program. I can't remember what's separate.
This is what we've got.
And eight-
I
and
think-
eight are complete.
I think it's now
Eight are complete and then 10 are
10:45 and we should be coming back to part 3 of the committee, strategic matters, and I hope we'll see Margaret's push there. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome back, and thank you for your promptness in returning back. So strategic matters, and we're moving to 3.1 National Education Training Plan. And Lisa, I believe you're leading on this. She's back.
Lisa's not here yet. So if you wish, I can kick off because I'm the co-exec lead on this. Unless you want to wait for Lisa, probably is better wait for Lisa.
If you're happy to start, because we are.
Okay, I'll start then. This is the education training plan that we've been developing over the last few months. As you know, it's undergone a different approach this year. We've put a planning function around it. We've had really good formal engagement through a number of routes, one through the stakeholder reference group and the individual elements of that. We've had engagement through the peer groups. We presented to chief execs and to the partnership forum. So there's been quite wide engagement on this, probably greater than we've done previously, which I think is to its benefit. In addition, I mean, those of you might recall that prior to HEIW, what used to happen was you would have WEDs doing the health professionals and nursing and midwifery plan, pharmacy independently doing their pharmacy plan, and the deanery, as it was known at the time, doing the dental and medical plan. So I think this has come on a really good journey, but this year we've done quite high mileage to get it to where it is now. So we've taken feedback from all the groups that we've been to. We've adjusted the plan and updated it based on feedback that we've had. It's now reached the point where I think it's close to its final version, apart from inserting a few hyperlinks and that sort of thing. So unless Lisa wants to say anything more, just introduce the plan to yourselves. It's there in its format, and happy to take any comments and questions, I would say.
Thank you, Push. Lisa, you might have missed the first part of Push's introduction.
Sorry.
And if there's anything you wanted to put across particularly, and if it's repeated, we'll accept it because
No. So basically, what I did that you want to say was that obviously this is being discussed and is by the executive team. Is recommended here to the ECQC and the board for approval, just to be mindful that this is going to the leadership board actually next week. So there may be some really minor changes which we can then verbally report to the board, but we don't anticipate actually many changes at all. But I think actually the key thing to put across is the improvements, how this is aligned to the IMTP. It's an iterative process now, and I think it's not going to be a once a year thing. It's actually an ongoing development. It's been very well received by actually everybody. But the key thing as well is actually to understand actually that it was taken to the partnership forum last week as well. So this is broader than the SRG, and it was very, very well received. And really actually the feedback that we've had is actually very positive, and the big difference since last year is that stakeholders have received the detail, which is what the lesson learned was from last year. What I would actually urge is that the lesson learned this year is to make sure that the members at the stakeholder reference group take their responsibility and take that back into their organisations. That is something that probably we need to test and actually learn actually if that has happened as well as we probably anticipated. But yes, happy to take any questions. It's a good document.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Just to open it up again for questions, and I know Jill, you wanted to raise something. Okay.
Just two very quick ones, thank you, Chair. The first is around the buy-in from the other organisations, and does it chime with their IMTPs going forward and their funding? And secondly, I guess one for Rhiannon as well, which is the likelihood of agreement by the Welsh Government to the uplift.
So can I comment on engagement with the organisations? One of the challenges we always have is how much how they reach their IMTP recommendations, because unless they start having the same rigor of workforce planning that I think they need, I'm not sure how they can always give us accurate IMTP recommendations. I can tell you when I was in the health board, it was, oh, what should we ask for this year? And it was almost like a finger in the air saying, oh, let's just ask what we last year, add a couple here and there. So I don't think there's any great evidence base on how they reach their IMTP numbers. Having said that, every time we don't reach their IMTP numbers, they challenge to say why they haven't been reached. And we, of course, have the comeback to say, well, you didn't have jobs for the posts that you actually asked for in the original spec. So I think there needs to be a completion of that cycle of asking for intelligent numbers, us recognizing that and putting them into the plan for good reason, and then seeing it through to those posts being available and being appointed. Because otherwise we're putting money into bursary posts that don't get utilised in Wales. So I think that's a big challenge with the IMTP numbers that are put in. And that's the discussions we've had in all of those forums. As to whether health boards are bought into this, it has gone to all the peer groups represented by the health board. So all of the individual professional areas have had their say. And it's also gone to chief execs, where it was extremely well received across the patch. So I would say that we've engaged with them pretty well. And I think we've addressed the IMTP requests through this. And the last comment about the IMTP requests, they don't take into account our training capacity. And our training capacity often sits with the health boards. And in that sense, they're part of the solution to reach their IMTP numbers by having the training capacity within their organisations.
Thank you, Push.
Just a comment to add to that, Push, because I know we've gone through the medical bit, we talked about commissioning, but one of the key themes that came out of commissioning this year was the uplift in the requirements for additional staffing, medical and non-medical, but also the requirement for training that would entail. And that the balance of getting more staffing, but also having the ability to train them properly was really important to consider, that the two have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Any other queries? Questions? Lisa, you've got your hand up, and so has Margaret. So did you want anything to feedback to Jill on her question? Is that why your hand up?
Yes, it is actually really. And building actually on what Push has just sort of explained it to you. The key component is the placement capacity. This is where, everything we do in HIW, it does actually contribute to this plan. And you're absolutely right, Jill, to ask that question. So I will probably say that sometimes actually health boards actually do ask for more than what we are able to commission. Now, it's not a reason that we can't commission them, because we do work actually with our HEIs to understand what their highest numbers are. But one of the key areas that actually sort of inhibits us actually go into that number is the number of placements. So now there's no point actually sort of having twice as many people actually being trained if we can't give them that quality experience in that placement opportunity. So that is absolutely quite key. And Push is absolutely right. The conversations that you with health boards happen at many levels, and the outcomes of this is exactly actually where streamlining and where our graduates manage to get a post or not. So it's a linear sort of long-term sort of conversation, because obviously these commissions will go in 2023, but will not come out until another 2028, so 2026. So, it's a linear, because these are courses that will start in 2023, but the graduates won't come out at you until 2026. So it is a long-term conversation.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Margaret?
Just briefly, just wanted to let the committee know that one of the areas that we're really struggling still to get good understanding of what should be commissioned from an education and training lens is certainly in community care, primary and community care. So we have to do a lot of legwork to be able to understand what the need is in that environment, because the IMTP, some health boards do reflect the needs of the primary and community care and others don't. So it's very difficult to determine quite often when their IMTPs come in as to whether they have reflected that or they haven't reflected that. So I think it's not a perfect science for that yet, but we do need to get much smarter when we're working with our, contractors out in our, right close to home, where we're going to need these people to do more, and we need the workforce to be able to do that. So that's work in progress, but yeah, it is something that at the moment isn't perfect, and we need to sort of work to be sure that those numbers are really what is needed.
Any other?
Going to pick up on the funding point. So the increase articulated in the plan is 31 million above our existing baseline, but 15.8 of that is sort of baked in costs from previous developments and previous steps up in numbers. So we've taken this draft plan through the Directors of Finance group. Welsh Government finance colleagues are in that forum. I've also sort of socialised it with the Welsh Government finance team. So this won't go in as a surprise to them. A further 7 million of this is the mental health workforce plan.
Yeah.
That's a specific budget commitment made by Welsh Government. So we're anticipating that will be anticipated at least. The pharmacy undergraduate placement business case is included in this total. So I suppose once you strip out the elements that are separate to the real sort of new investment, that leaves sort of 6 or 7 million. That is only a pilot effect, but we have been submitting these 3-year plans every year since HIW started, and in the IMTP we've got a 5-year financial forecast. So I suppose we've done as much as we can to tell them that these things are coming, and I think it was positive in the Directors of Finance Forum that they understand that not investing in the future education training of our staff is really shooting ourselves in the foot, because the system incurs more cost in the long run through locum and agency staff, than we're investing through this. So it is received positively, and everybody understands. It doesn't make it any more, I suppose, any easier for Welsh Government to balance their position, but we anticipate positive response to this.
Any other questions? I think there's a couple of comments from me in particular, Lisa. one in relation to the issue that you've mentioned about placements and actually delivering on the INTP and the commitment of, I guess, the local health boards. I actually have asked a couple of times now about first destination in terms of the data, so that if we are commissioning, whether we're able to identify where the first destination of our students that we're commissioning actually take up placements in their first year following training. Because if we're able to capture that information, we would be able to cross-reference that to the INTPs going forward and see whether the health boards themselves actually seek to employ the people that they've actually asked us for going down the line. I wonder if that's something we can look at. I think one of the other things that feeds into that, I was at a consultation event last week with HIW, where listening to the social care element of that and the impact that has on the footprint within a local health board area and also the local authority area, is to say whether or not they've actually encountered the service level needs for the independent sector, because they will draw on the training figures. So the points you've made in relation to the workforce plans coming in the INTPs from local health boards, that should give a bigger picture. And they were suggesting too that that should maybe be captured. And I think from that perspective, it would be very, very helpful to see going forward whether there is a challenge to how we pick up those first destination figures, because we're not in control of all that information. There's an element of shared services picking in. So I'd like to see quite a bit of the data coming in saying, this is what you've told us you need, this is what placements you've provided. At the end of the training agenda, this is where we're giving you the set number of students back. And one of the other positive outcomes of that consultation with HIW was doing was the broadening of the commissionings across the whole of Wales in educational establishments, because what they felt was that when students moved to a university, they were reluctant to stay post-qualifying and they would go back to where they were originally domiciled. Whereas now, if you have people being educated within their own local community, it meets quite a lot of our strategic intent. So going forward, we've got different agendas with the new contracting process, and I think so we should keep our eye on as a committee. I don't know how people feel about what I've said, but that's certainly come from the open consultation that as HIW has been conducting around Wales.
Tina, I could come back on that. And you're right, as you said. Therefore, in terms of the first destination, that is something we are looking at, because obviously the key component there is to do that through the streamlining process. And we are working with shared service to gather that data as to where that first employment destination is. So that work is currently being undertaken. We know some of it, but we don't know all of it. In relation to social care and the engagement with health boards, that's another very important aspect that we're exploring as well. And there are some sort of obviously disciplines where local authorities obviously want to recruit as well as health boards. So we are working at health boards because there is a dilemma there, shall I say, and I'm sure Rihanna will come in on this, because when vacancies are identified in health boards, they are more often it's about what's in their cost envelope and what they can fund, and therefore they identify those vacancies. We're very aware that some of those graduates may want to go into local authorities and local government, but also into the independent sector, and that's an area that we're trying to understand how health boards are working with health boards, with local government, to understand what that need is. But that is an area that we need to do more work on, because if I give you an occupational therapist as an example, a local government want to employ occupational therapists, but that's not taken away from what the figures that health boards need as well. And we need to be those figures need to come into us as part of our commission in a better way. We're not there yet, but that is work that we're undertaking with social care to understand, because the care home sector is another one. They could be taking on new registered nurses as well. So therefore, how do we identify their needs and capture it? But as you say, is commitment then to offer the vacancies 3 years hence. That is actually the challenge that we have.
And the placements routine, maybe pharmacists.
Exactly.
All of those kind of things, pharmacy students. So it is something we can look at. So thank you for that. So Ruth, do you want to come in?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think this is an outstanding piece of work, and I think the processes to deliver it have been excellent, and I haven't any suggestions to improve it. But I don't know if it was you, Lisa, or Push, who said that this is going to be, particularly with its link with our IMTP, this is going to be a rolling thing rather than a one-off. And I'm just wondering whether you also mentioned that there were 1 or 2 lessons which have been learned, particularly in relation to stakeholders. Is there going to be a moment in time when the sort of space for looking at the lessons that we've learned out of this would be useful? It seems to me that it's different. The way we've approached this is different to what we might have, well, certainly what we've done in the past. And if it is going to roll on, it might be worthwhile just thinking about capturing as a checklist those points that are obvious now, but we might lose in time.
So Ruth, you're absolutely right. So if you recall, the development of this particular plan is different to previous, but that was as a result of the lessons learned exercise that we undertook last year in response to the previous plan. So it was important, and there were a number of initiatives that we took forward, and this is the result of it. It's still, we are learning from it, but the team actually sort of overseeing this, have already fed that back, actually some of those lessons learned. They are capturing them, and they've captured more as well. And as we come to, the conclusion or the submission of this, we will do that evaluation of the process, because it is very different to what happened last year. When I say it's a rolling program, what I'm meaning there is that already we've engaged more elements of the education and training actually within HCIW into this particular report. And already people are realizing that it is a very good vehicle to raise the profile of some of the initiatives that we are, only actually in its infancy, say today, but will be very meaningful for the next report. So it's not just start in January. They're starting to think about, and Rhiannon will probably enlighten on this as well, as to what we are thinking about will be included in the next one, rather than a standstill and start again. But you're absolutely right. We will do the lessons learned.
It would be really interesting to see that. And it would be nice if it included not just the things that we could do better, but the things that are done really well, and we learned lessons that this works. But thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ruth. So in relation to what we just discussed, I wonder if we could put that on a forward programme, David, for this committee, and then depending on the outcome of that, whether that's something we could then feed into board, because it would involve a wider board of discussion, I think, of the lessons learned. But if we first had it coming back to this committee, and if Lucy, you could liaise with Push and suggest a timetable for that. Ruth, would you be happy with that? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we'll.
So if there are no more questions, then the committee's asked to, subject to receiving future comments on what we've done today, recommend the draft education training plan for 23-24, including the appendices, which there were quite a number of details in those as well, to the board for approval. So are you content that we recommend the draft education to the board? Note further updates to the plan may be made following the final consultation, which you've already alluded to, Lisa. Yeah. People are content with that. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And can I just echo on behalf of the committee the huge amount of work that's gone into producing this, because it's not easy, and the fact that you've got the engagement that you've had with the partnership and the wider individuals has been tremendous. So please feed that back to your teams as well, the appreciation from the committee. Okay, 3.2, update on phase 2 of the strategic review of health professional education. And I guess this is you again, Lisa, is it?
Chair, could I just comment before we have the discussion on phase 2, just to ask that members confirm their interest with regards to universities, so that's just formally recorded. I know we've done it before, but if we could just record that now, please. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gareth, because I did, David, because I did ask that at the beginning, and we've raised a couple of times that we haven't had that. So to declare that I am a fellow of the University of South Wales. Does anybody else that has any links to the universities? Can you declare it?
Yeah, Push Mangat, I've got an honorary chair at Swansea University Department of Medicine.
Thank you, Push. Margaret.
Honorary professorship at Cardiff School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences.
Thank you. David, are you content now? Yeah.
Well, can
I think Ruth Hall has. Yeah.
I've got two to mention. One is an honorary chair with the University of the West of England, and I chair the advisory group to the Centre for Public Policy based at Cardiff University.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so moving on then, we're 3.2, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned,
I'll hear you.
Say that again.
Can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Because I'm off mute.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. So thank you, Chair. As I mentioned briefly earlier, we are undertaking the systematic review of postgraduate education for post-registration education. And this is this follows on actually from the review of pre-reg education. And this is a key piece of work that we are currently undertaking. So we're leading the phase 2 here. And as you can see actually within the document, actually section 3 describes to you the aim and the project outcomes for this piece of work. And then actually what I can say is actually that this actually involves 14 groups of education to commission by September 2025. So these are quite extensive actually programs of work that need to be reviewed because they haven't been previously reviewed for a number of years. And in order to ensure that the education that is being provided by our sort of education institutions are current, evidence-based and actually of good quality, it was very important that this review was undertaken. So what we've done is actually previously brought to you on previous reports actually what is happening. So what I can say is actually that then in section 6 actually we are describing all the areas that we are taking forward. But it's actually quite interesting actually that one of the exciting areas that we are taking forward is new to Wales. And this is described actually in section 6 under clinical psychology and CAPS, which is actually the clinical associate in applied psychology. This is a new role in Wales, never been actually provided actually here before. And we've worked actually with our colleagues actually in England and Scotland, but as well as that with our current health boards and our current HEIs in order to develop this role, which has been described as needed. That actually supports the mental health workforce plan. And obviously it's quite an exciting opportunity. And we will be piloting approved 20 places from this September. And then this will become part of the commissioning arrangement actually going forward, which we will bring back to this committee. So then in terms of actually the areas that we are currently actually commissioning, if you go to section 7, that describes to you the areas that we are looking at and the timescales. And you can see from there which ones are sort of being taken forward as we speak. There's a lot of detail actually in there. And then what I will say, like I'm trying to find, on page 175, you will see actually the journey of how we describe actually how we are progressing with all these component pieces within actually that arena. So the one that is really actually leading that way on that right-hand side is healthcare support worker level 4, which we will be considering in the closed session today. But as you can see, actually, there's a lot of work going on with the others as well to take these forward. This actually requires extensive engagement with all these professional groups and the health boards to understand what the current delivery is, what the current need is, and what the future need is, because we are looking at future-proofing many of these arenas. So I'm happy to take any questions, but the programme board actually overseeing this receives regular reports, and the progress has been actually quite significant over the last few months. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions or comments for Lisa? It seems to have been a very informed set of papers, Lisa, because we don't have any questions. So a couple of comments I do want to say that I do like to see this on an all Wales basis and looking at actually the challenge that we've had is often when somebody leaves one health board and goes to another health board where there's been an in-service level of training where they've actually then been required to get the clinical skills. So this will actually hopefully seek to standardise quite a lot of the expectations of what the workforce will deliver and affect patient outcome quite dramatically. So I'm really, really encouraged by this. And it's quite exciting to see that this is a strategy going forward, hopefully.
And this is a vehicle, actually, this project, this programme also considers all the changes in regulation currently going on, which I mentioned earlier as well with the NMC, and this embraces that and takes these on board to make sure the future programmes are fit for purpose and up to date and actually taking forward the quality standards that we need.
That's really, really good to see. So the committee is asked to note the progress on several work streams, breadth and depth of them, and the proposed timescales. Yeah. Okay, so once again, thanks, Lisa, and look forward to receiving updates as it progresses. Thank you. So that will conclude the strategic matters part of the agenda, and we're now moving on to part 4, governance matters, and item 4.1, draft committee self-assessment. And handing over to you, David. Yeah, and if you're delivering this in Welsh, just to remind people that we have got Hugh Owen here who will do the translation. Okay, thank you.
Diolch, Chair. Yes, I will be delivering the next 4 papers in Welsh. So here we go. So y ddogfen gyntaf, esgusodwch chi. Dyma ddogfen ar gyfer adolygu effeithlonrwydd y pwyllgor. Bydd aelodau'r pwyllgor yn ymwybodol fod yn ymarfer da fod y pwyllgor yn cynnal hunan asesiad bob blwyddyn. Felly, yn fyr iawn, dyn ni'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor i ystyried yr holiadur a'i gymeradwyo os gwelwch yn dda. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Okay, thank you. So to open it up to the committee then, I know that we've done previous self-assessments and it runs throughout the organisation. So are there any comments people would like to pass on to David? Jill.
Thanks, Tina. Just a couple of things on timescales, I guess. First is that to run through when we're expecting to bring this back, because this is for last year, I guess. So what were the timescales for completion? Are we doing it as individuals? Are we doing it as a committee? Just those sort of the administration of it, really.
Thanks, Jill. So we will be sharing the questionnaire in the next week or so. We'll be asking for feedback by mid-August, so we're giving slightly bit more time because we're in the holiday period. And we would be looking to provide the report back to education at the next meeting, Education Committee in September, which is early September.
Okay, so there are some members of the committee who aren't able to attend today through a variety of reasons. So it may be helpful if an email could be sent out to them advising them that potentially that we're going to, if we agree this, approve the content of the committee paper, that they would be required to fill it within timescales. That would be helpful.
Yes, so we'll be sharing the questionnaire after the meeting, but by email, so it'll go out on that basis. That's fine.
About the formal notification, because they haven't been, the long-standing members of the committee that aren't here today won't be part of this discussion. So if we could send them notification of the timescale specific, would be helpful. David, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And just to come back, just for I guess going forward, good practice is that you do these as soon as possible after the year end, as we know, so that any results can be fed into the next year's deliberations. And we're already going to be in September, so perhaps just a note for next year that perhaps we could do it at a meeting previous to this one.
Okay, and I take that on board, and I think one of the complications is that we also moved this meeting, because this meeting has been delayed because we were all attending the NHS Conveyed conference as a complete board. So unfortunately, we've been part of that. So I understand that, but I do take on board what you say, and David, if we can look at that in terms of the forward work plan and making sure we're compliant with that over the next year. Yeah.
Will do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So the committee members are asked to approve the content of the committee effectiveness review document in Appendix 1. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. 4.2, the draft committee annual report. Over to you, David.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly papur yn gofyn am gymeradwyaeth ydy hon. Prif ddiben neu pwrpas yr adroddiad blynyddol, wrth gwrs, ydy'n bod ni'n crynhoi y meysydd a ystyriwyd gan y Pwyllgor yn ystod y flwyddyn ariannol diwethaf. Mae'r adroddiad hefyd yn tynnu sylw at y materion allweddol bydd y Pwyllgor yn ystyried eleni, enghraifft rhan 2 o'r adolygiad strategol o addysg iechyd a proffesiynol, effaith y datblygiad digidol ar addysg ac addysg aml broffesiynol. Felly mae y Forward Work Programme y Pwyllgor eisoes yn adlewyrchu bod ni'n bwriadu ffocysu ar yr ardaloedd hynny. Felly, da ni'n gofyn i aelodau'r Pwyllgor i ystyried a cymeradwyo'r adroddiad blynyddol fel ei bod yn cael ei gyflwyno i'r bwrdd yn ei gyfarfod yn mis Gorffennaf, os gwelwch yn dda. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Questions? Okay, so to reaffirm that the committee members are asked to approve the annual report 2021 and 2022 for submission to the board for assurance. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. 4.3.
Tina, sorry, Chair. Before we leave that item, I'm sorry, I'm struggling a bit trying to get my hand up. Just as an opportunity, I think, just to reflect that last year was yet another difficult year with COVID and many other stresses, and to acknowledge the steadfastness and the extraordinary effort of staff, particularly on our committee, to keep the business flowing. And I just think that maybe we could just express gratitude now on behalf of the committee, because I was responsible at that time. Very appreciative, and I hope it's noted. It's actually in the intro.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, previous Chair, as in Ruth, because I didn't see your hand going up, and I'm having difficulty with that because it doesn't always come through. But we'd echo that, because no matter what, we sit around, and we've got a hybrid meeting today. Quite a lot of the work was done online, and therefore that information and the sharing and the engagement that both the committee's been able to have with the teams, but also the engagement with the wider community to participate in consultations. You hear what the recipients of our work is, and the impact that it's having outside of HIW is important as well. But I think the committee annual report in what it's set up to do, and its roles and responsibilities to our overall board is important too. And we need to be assured that we're actually doing what we're asked to do, and meeting those needs. So having been the previous chair, Ruth, I do take your points, and also, you know, the work that you had and ensuring that and the leadership that you had and ensuring that was how we delivered. So thank you. Okay, so if we can move on to 4.3, proposal for HIW multi-professional quality insurance education group. That's you as well, David, yeah?
It is. Sorry, diolch, Cadeirydd. Papur yn ystyried dyfodol y grŵp ansawdd ac addysg aml broffesiynol neu'r MPQEG ydy hwn. Yn wir, mae papur yn gofyn i aelodau ystyried y cynnwys y papur ac argymhelliad i'r bwrdd y dylid datgomisiynu'r MPQEG. Bydd aelodau yn cofio i'r pwyllgor yn ei gyfarfod diwethaf nôl mis Chwefror, dwi'n credu, ofyn am papur ar gyfer dyfodol y grŵp. O ran cyd-destun, roedd y bwrdd newydd penderfynu wneud i ffwrdd gyda'r Education Advisory Group a bod y grŵp rhanddeiliad yn cael ei osod yn ei le. Mae'r adolygiad o'r MPQEG wedi ystyried y cyfarfodydd blaenorol o'r grŵp ynghyd â'i cylch gorchwil. Mae'r adolygiad yn argymell bod y grŵp yn cael ei ddatgomisiynu am y rhesymau canlynol. Mae yna teimlad fod y papurau'r MPQEG yn cael ei ystyried yn reoledd gan y tîm rheoli ac hefyd yn orgyffwrdd â gwaith y grŵp dirprwyon a dionied newydd. Felly mae'r papur yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor ystyried ei gynnwys ac yn benodol yn argymell, yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor argymell i'r bwrdd y dylid datgomisiynu'r grŵp ansawdd ac addysg aml broffesiynol neu'r MPQEG. Os gwelwch yn dda. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd.
Okay, thank you, David. Can I open that up now for any comments or questions that you might have? Push.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that this is the conclusion we should reach. We found that the work that was being put into that group, whilst initially appropriate at the time that we created it, later became clear it was being duplicated elsewhere. And now that we've got the both the deputies and deans group and as well as the executive team looking at the same work, we think there's really good governance of this area, these areas of work. So it's not the MPQEG is probably now superfluous.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments?
Yeah, just a comment. I know that we had a similar group in the medical deanery before MPQEG started, and we disbanded because we didn't want to duplicate effort. And I'm just wondering whether at a lower level we need to have some kind of meetings just to make sure that we've got governance arrangements within our directorates or departments. So for example, with the deanery, which can then provide a higher level of scrutiny, because I think some of the work which we did before, we would have then put straight into MPQEG to avoid duplication, and I just want to make sure that we don't. So that's something I'll take back to our senior medical team in the deanery to make sure we don't lose out, so that we can still provide the right level of information to this group. And I just wonder if other groups want to do something similar, or if that wasn't considered necessary.
Well, we should definitely do something within the medical directorate, but we think that that's where the deputies and deans group now fits, because that provides a level of seniority from both Lisa's and my directorate and other directorates or areas like planning and leadership. So I think that now provides probably a better coverage than the multi-professional group did previously. From what I recall, Malcolm, it was the EAG and the multi-professional group that was replacing the function of the previous group that you talk about. So the external stakeholder part has been addressed, and the internal part of it is now, it comes through the directorate system into exec team to go to an education committee. I think we've probably got more than enough courage, but by all means take it back if you think you need a lower level to feed into it via Tom or Tom's deputy structure. But I don't think we need anything different to that.
Well, that's good, thanks.
Okay, Kirsty?
Just really to echo, so I chair the Deputies and Deans Group, which just provides assurance to the committee that it is very much across the organisation. We have quality on that standing agenda item, and Tom is always there. So it is very much part of the structure and comes through. And it already in its infancy, that group is yielding because it is multi-professional, the independent prescriber work. We're identifying where there are economies. We're working across the organisation. So just really to confirm that.
So you are confirming that your query, and you can have that, yeah?
I'm happy with that. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty. Lisa.
Okay. This is a reflection, I think, of how the organisation has developed and how sort of the arenas of information coming in and, dare I say, proposals coming into the organisation have to be considered by a multi-professional approach. And I think what we've seen is that the infrastructure within HEIW has obviously developed and enhanced that opportunity. So it's not diminishing what the purpose of this particular group was when it was actually set up. But I think things have moved on and we've now got more robust opportunities to discuss on a multi-professional basis, whether something is taken forward or how it's taken forward. And the Deputies and Dean groups is actually a mechanism for doing that. And then actually takes it back down into the appropriate arena in order for it to be either taken forward by education, by commissioning, actually, and whatever means necessary. And of course, as a result of that, through Push, Margaret, Kirsty and my report, you will actually then receive that information as it develops within each of the directorates. So I think it's a reflection of how HEIW has grown and the maturity is taken on to consider from external partners, new initiatives, new ways of working and workforce transformation. And it needs that debate in order to consider how we take it forward and whether we do take it forward or not. So I think it's a really welcome development that we decommission this particular group, because we've got mechanisms in place now which are actually enriching that discussion going forward.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Any other comments?
Can I just come in?
Yes.
I mean, in fact, Lisa's just said it really. I remember the discussion around setting up this group, and I'm very supportive of it now being decommissioned for the reasons that Lisa's outlined. I think, however, there's a really important paragraph in the paper which is about what the arrangements are that effectively replace what we had envisaged that group would do. And I've got it in front of me here. It outlines receiving we receive regular updates and so on. And then it says the executive team and audit assurance committee monitor and escalate risks regarding education training to the education committee via the corporate risk registers. And I just don't quite understand that. Because it sounds as if the audit and assurance committee is escalating risks to us. So it may be in the wording, but I think that whole paragraph, it needs to be highlighted. It's on page 2 of the report and halfway down. But the extant question, which is should the MPEG be disestablished, I fully support. Thank you.
Lisa's got a hand up and so is David. So is this to answer this query? something, okay.
I think Ruth raises a very good point. So in terms of actually raising risks, you've seen today how we enhance and escalate risks to this committee through the quality of your reports that we actually do develop for you, and that is actually appropriate to do that. I think you're absolutely right, Ruth, that even that I don't think risks come from audit insurance that you cross to this committee. I think what happens is risks are taken through the risk management process that you within the organisation, are escalated actually onto that corporate risk register, but it doesn't need to go to the audit insurance before it comes to us. I think it goes actually in a variety of ways. And the way that we do it, we do escalate risks actually, and they do go to the executive team, but also we take those risks and report directly into this committee, independent, because we've expanded on the risks that come through education. And in my paper today, there are a number of those that are not on the corporate risk register for very good reasons. So they actually come to this committee because it is bespoke about education commissioning. So I think your point is well made, Ruth.
Thank you. David, is this also on this point?
It is. I guess I'm not in complete agreement with Lisa on that point. So the terms of reference for the Education Committee and Audit Committee do anticipate that where there are risks that are of particular relevance to this committee, that the Audit Committee would transfer, would raise and ask that the committee picks them up. And there are examples of that happening in the past, although maybe not recently. Although there was one example earlier on today with regards to the risk around midwifery. That's on the corporate risk register, and Lisa actually confirmed that she would be bringing a report to this committee arising from that risk. So there is, I guess it's been acting a bit informally, but when we were drafting in terms of reference for these committees, there's certainly anticipation that there would be an element of cross-reporting, and that's also one of the reasons why we always have an independent member that's a member of both the Audit Committee and the Education Committee, so that there is that relationship. Although we're trying to be very, very careful that we avoid having any overlap, but nevertheless, when there's a key risk that immediately impacts upon this committee, then there would be a consideration of the risk being transferred from the Audit Committee to this committee.
Mm-hmm. So just to confirm, Chair, actually, in terms of that particular risk, yes, it actually has been escalated through our processes actually within the organisation. Has been actually escalated to exec team, and I've brought it here as well. So although it's on the risk register, it has come through this appropriate route. It hasn't, and I will be reporting on it to this committee, not to the audit committee.
I don't know if you can hear me, Lisa, but I was trying to bring push in to see if this was still on this agenda.
Yeah, it
Sorry.
is, Chair. That's fine. I was just going to say, because I don't get to say this very often, but an audit done in my area on risk management received substantial assurance.
Congratulations, Bush. Well done.
So I'd just like to say that it seems to be working well. How we manage risk.
That's a brilliant link.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Chair. Just to reassure everybody, the risks quite properly come here in terms of quality and would be escalated to this committee. If it then goes on to the corporate risk register, it would come in front of the Audit and Assurance Committee to see whether there are any assurance or probity issues in terms of governance. We wouldn't then re-debate the quality issues at the Audit and Assurance Committee. So just because our responsibility at the Audit and Assurance Committee is to look at the risk register, then that's why there would be an element of supposed duplication, but it wouldn't be scrutinised unless there were some issues of governance and process and assurance, in which case, obviously, the relevant officer would come to the Audit and Assurance Committee then to answer those questions.
David, you still have your hand up. Thank you, Jill.
Just very concise point. I think John Hill-Tout was incredibly helpful in advising how we should consider the role of the Audit Committee versus the role of the Education Committee. And he concisely put it as the Audit Committee would look at the how, while the Education Committee should be looking at the what. And I've always found that really concise and helpful.
So if I can come back to Ruth, because Ruth raised this issue.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the discussion now, Ruth?
Well, I just point is if we're going to disband this group and it's going to disappear, then we just need to be clear about that the mechanisms are in place.
Mhm.
They need to be captured somewhere. And it may be that we need to go back to our terms of reference or whatever and see. But that particular phrase, it's not about function in relation to risk. It's about the way it's phrased. And I think the wording is the issue for me, not the spirit of what I think is intended behind it. But the wording is crucial. We cannot opt out of something, just push it out the window without knowing that we are on solid ground in terms of what we've got to support us. We may feel we are, but I think that needs to be captured in writing. So that's just my view.
I wonder whether we could agree a form of words, David, and we're being asked to recommend this to the board to be decommissioned at the next board meeting. I wonder whether we could agree a form of words to explain the elements of the discussion. I just wonder whether the executive team and audit assurance committee monitor and may escalate risks to the education, where the word may, pertaining to their particular areas of responsibility, would suffice. How do you think, Ruth? Would that meet your needs, and would it meet the needs of the chair of the audit committee? If you'd put may in there.
Yeah. Struggling a bit with what the issue is. Maybe
I think you need capturing this in the papers of the board is where we need to be content. For me.
Ruth, I just wonder whether it might be worth Ruth articulating, don't want to give you extra work, Ruth, but I'll sort of rephrasing it in a way that you think having sat on the audit committee as well might suffice. So I'm struggling a bit with what the difficulty is. So
there is an additional, sorry, David, there is an additional issue, is that when we have areas of challenge, we arrange combined meetings of the audit committee and the education at ECQC. So we where there are issues of concern, from a governance perspective, we bring those meetings together. And I just wonder whether that could be encapsulated within that form of word, because it's not, in terms of our unitary role as the board, we've all got that responsibility, haven't we? But I just wonder, in relation to that, whether that also needs to be added into that paragraph to say that where there are areas for at risk which need to be further developed, that they would be raised in the combined meeting and then recommendations made to the board. Would that suffice?
Yes, that would be good.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that back. I'll rework the paper and I'll share that with the Ruth before it goes to boards to ensure that we've covered our full bases.
Okay, so in terms of taking this forward, because we're being recommended, which recommend to the board the multi-professional quality and education group be decommissioned, are we content to do that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Lisa, you still got your hand up. Was there something you want to come back at?
Very briefly, I suppose that what's missing in this, which may answer Ruth at your question, is that you're recognising that the ECQC also monitors risks. That's the bit that's missing.
Okay, so
it looks as if we don't monitor risks, but we do. As a committee, we do.
Okay, so that's opened it up again. So I'm coming back.
Sorry.
Third time lucky. So to say that if we're looking at the executive team and the audit assurance committee, my computer's just gone off. There we are. And the education quality, well, ECQC committee all have responsibility to monitor and ensure the risks are escalated for final decision to the board, because the board do the corporate risk register, and that should encompass everything then, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
David, are you content with that? You add on in that, and that should suffice.
Okay, thank you.
So I come back then to say, subject to that change, whether we recommend to the board that the Laboratory Professional Quality and Education Group be decommissioned. It's good though, it's good, it's good, it's good. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, thanks. And we've now got 4.4, the review of committee terms of reference. And again, over to you, David, as well.
Ok, diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Esgusodwch chi. Gymwn i'r pwyllgor adolygu a chysoni gylch gorchgwyl, bydd aelodau'r pwyllgor yn ymwybodol i fod yn ymarfer da ein bod ni yn ymgymryd ar gwaith yma bob blwyddyn. Dim ond un man newid sydd yn cael ei awgrymu eleni, sef newid bach i teitl y swydd y cyfarwyddwr cyllid. Felly, da ni'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor i adolygu ei gylch gorchwyl, os gwelwch yn dda, a'n bod ni'n argymelli'r bwrdd i bod nhw yn mabwysiadu y newid bach i'r gylch gorchwyl. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd.
Thank you. So we'll open it now to the committee to see whether there's any areas that you would wish to see updated, changed, or are you happy to accept? Okay, so the committee is asked to review and agree its terms of reference.
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't get my hand up. Just for completeness, the titles Pharmacy Dean and Dental Dean should be Postgraduate Pharmacy Dean, Postgraduate Dental Dean, because there are undergraduate versions of the same.
Okay. Do we need to change those? Any other comments? Push your hand is still up. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's great.
So subject to the change in titles, are we happy to agree the terms of reference?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And 4.5 then, forward work programme. If I could hand back to David to comment on that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Yn gyflym iawn, papur yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor gymeradwyo'r ei blaen raglen waith ydi hon. Mi gath o ystyried yn y cyfarfod diwetha o'r pwyllgor ac roedd y cadeirydd newydd yn awyddus yn bod ni'n trafod y blaen rhaglen mewn manylder. Mae'r fersiwn o'r blaen rhaglen sy'n gebron heddiw yn adlewyrchu'r drafodaeth rhwng y fi a'r cadeirydd. Felly, da ni'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor os gwelwch yn dda gymeradwyo'r y blaen a raglen ar ei newyddwedd. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, David. Push.
Can I just say that there's a duplication on the Education Performance and Quality section where it says GMC National Training Survey and GMC Survey and Feedback. They're one and the same thing. So I think they need to be reported once, which will be in December, because we just had the launch of it, and we should have the feedback by December.
Okay.
And GMC survey and feedback, I think it might have represented when we had the GMC inspection, because that did get reported back in March. So I don't think we need that, because it's not done an annual. That's not done on an annual basis.
Just back on that push, there is an assurance process which is now annual. Would you want that to come back to this committee?
Yeah, please. So if there is an annual assurance process from the GMC about the way we quality manage, then that should be on there annually. When's the best time for that, Malcolm?
I'll double check and I'll feed that back into Kath and just say, and so they can be fed in on an annual basis. So I just need to I need to confirm when we get that, because the process is somewhat iterative, because we get a review, then a draft report, we comment on the report, then they issue a final report. So that's the bit which should come back here, and I just can't remember the exact timing when that is. But I think review is at the end of the year, so I imagine it would come back to you in the spring.
Well, that would fit. So that should be replaced with GMC
Quality assurance.
quality assurance feedback. And the last one, local education provider commissioning review, is me. It's not Lisa.
Okay. Any other?
No, that's fine.
Jill?
Yeah, very briefly, Chair. Just wondering about the issues we talked about in terms of the terms of reference, the self-assessment, etc. They really ought to be done prior to the start of the year, almost, the terms of reference. And
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I've taken that aboard from the earlier comments, so I'll left it on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, so they'll be added on then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the date moved. Okay, thank you. Push your hands up. Was that still something in place?
Yeah. Now that we've decided that the MQueg doesn't exist, we don't need draft and confirmed minutes of the multi-professional quality and education group in preliminary matters.
Yeah, so providing that's agreed by the board though, that they agree to it being disbanded. So if we can review that post board, yeah, just to be absolutely clear that we reported to the board, due diligence is moving forward, that we may recommend it, but they might not. So if we keep it on until the board agree that and take that forward. And a note on the minutes to remind me that an action, if we look at that next time, just take it off. Okay, that's lovely. Lisa, you had your hand up. Was you? No. Okay.
No.
So in relation to the committee is asked to approve the 22-23 Education Commissioning Quality Committee forward work plan that was shown at Appendix 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I've had no further information for noting. So no, that's fine. And any other business? I've had no notification of any other business either. Okay, so the date and time of the next meeting is Tuesday, 6th of September, 10 a.m. to 12:45 via Zoom and Tdusky. And can I just say a huge thanks to everybody for my first chairing of this hybrid meeting, and also to Seth, who has been in attendance. Thank you very much, because I know we've had quite a lot to discuss, and also yourself, Malcolm, for coming and participating so well in the meeting. So it goes without saying that there's a huge amount of work gone into the papers that we've had, and behind all those papers is a team of work as well. So if you could express our thanks on behalf of the committee to everybody involved, that it makes life easier when you're doing the assurance processes, that you can go through and the information's in front of you. Although there's a lot of crouchy reading, I will say, in those papers and cross-referencing, but thank you very, very much. And I now close this meeting, and we will move into committee session, and we are a few minutes behind time. Sorry, David, not too long, but thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Who I'm assuming, are we all done now? on you